Good morning, Greg.
Good morning, David.
How are
How you
you?
doing?
Oh,
I'm good. I'm good.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. I
Yeah.
almost had to
I
leave.
think I think hopefully we worked out our bugs and everyone can hear me this morning.
Probably. Are you? Did you remember to mute Skype?
I don't think I did.
Because it
I
sounds
need to
weird for
hang
me,
up.
but I think it's good for everybody else.
There, I hung up Skype. Even
Oh,
better.
yeah. Well, you could just mute it in case.
Well, no, it's hung up.
It's
It's
gone
done. It's
forever.
gone.
Gone. We shall never speak of this thing again. Yeah, it's a great morning here. The weather's nice finally. I think we're away from the snow period.
No, you just jinxed it. And
Ish.
plus, we haven't missed May long, so
That's
it's
true. Well,
May
we're missing
long.
it
We always
anyway.
have snow. So,
Speaking of May long weekend, we won't be here.
well,
Just
one of us won't be here.
that's
I don't
true.
know whether I'll be here or not.
Okay,
I
I
have
won't be
I,
here.
I have not yet decided if I'm going to be another place.
Things
So
and spaces and stuff. But
yes.
awesome. So before we get all the way into it, let's push the button. I push the button.
So
And
we want to thank these awesome people that support us on Patreon. Uh, Hilge at the top there, and everybody else that supports us. You guys are great, and they all join us in Discord, and we have a nice community in there where we chat about news and stuff coming up and things we're doing, and it's
mm-hmm.
it's great. There's been some really good chats with Stig and Ray and everything about different stuff with open source and slicers and all that kind of stuff. It's a really good conversation in there. So if you want to join, you just go to patreon.com/3D make it
Slash 3D
and
make it.
you can see all the different levels that you can support us at. So
You need
feel
to use your
free to
radio voice.
like and subscribe and all that stuff as well.
uh, it was yeah. And again, if you want to find us anywhere, you can go to 3dmakeit.ca as well, and then you can get to all of our links. Obviously, if you're here on YouTube, we'd sure appreciate a share, subscribe, a like,
Yeah,
a warm
absolutely.
YouTube hug, as it were.
Well,
Um,
you gotta. It's kind of like nodding to the algorithm gods.
yeah,
So
it's like, yay. These looks like Dominic went from very warm to cool. Oh, sorry, buddy. I mean, we haven't actually hit 80 yet here, but we're hoping. But like, as soon as it's above, like, I don't know, what I forget what about seven
above
degrees.
freezing.
Yeah,
As soon as
shorts
it's
come
above
out.
freezing,
Yeah, it's summer for Canada, so
yeah. My
um,
wife put some plants out. One of them died.
yeah, the frost came. The
Well, it wasn't the frost; it was the wind.
Oh, the
It
wind
knocked it
got it.
over,
Oh
and,
dear.
and
Yeah, we do. We still have some morning frost. But speaking of Discord, Greg, somebody had posted an article. One of our Patreons had posted an article that Bamboo Labs had put out about um, the Creality K1. I don't know if it was specifically about that, but the
well, they were kind of like, congratulating them slightly ish.
so here's the thing.
And commenting
Yeah.
about the state of, they called it a new era,
Yeah.
but I don't know if it's a
Wah,
new
wah,
era because
wah.
we've been in this era for a while.
We have.
um
Yeah.
I do think Clipper itself has definitely changed some things, but
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I
I,
don't wouldn't
eh,
necessarily call that a new era.
no, I don't know. I would say Clipper changed things. I would say, like, yeah, Clipper's pretty good. Don't get me wrong. Okay, and obviously, we're right smack in the middle of our Marlin Clipper streams, and we like both. Again, we're not choosing
Yeah.
favorites here, but like, I think the for me, it's funny because all of these machines that are coming out that are speed, right? And that's what the Bamboo article was alluding to was the fact that like we're entering like fast printing. They're all Core
Yeah.
XY machines, all of them, and like that Core XY machines have been around for a very long time, but it wasn't until a certain open platform that lots of people like to print and build their own of
Voron.
and I mean, we had Rat Rig too, right? To be
Yeah,
fair,
Rat
there
Rig.
was more than just Voron,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. No,
But
I would say that Voron kind of made it the way they went about promoting it
yeah,
and designing it. They made it more community popular
yeah,
in that respect.
yeah.
Not that Rat
Voron,
Rig,
you're right, Gary. Yeah, yeah.
not that Rat Rig isn't very popular. It is,
Mm-hmm.
but Voron has a number of different designs, a number of different like the community really kind of refined a lot of stuff and made it more popular.
Yep.
I mean, you have a Core XY, and that was way before Voron,
It was right, and like I bought
right?
mine a long time ago. Now it's probably 4 or 5 years, right? And
Yeah.
it works great. I could print a lot faster than I do on it, right? But again, it's funny. I was having this conversation with somebody else yesterday too. It's like if you want to print fast or get parts out faster, the best option is add more printers. Right? Like
Well,
if you wanted
yeah,
to do
that's
big projects, instead of printing at 600 millimeters a second, I could split it across like 5 printers and still print like, and yes, some of the things are limiting, right? Like there's a limit to how fast you can sling a bed back and forth.
right.
The limit on
Well,
which you
and
can flip that hot end though is a lot
right.
higher, and that's why I think we
And
see these speed.
yeah, and speaking of Creality and the K1 and whatnot, one of the things that kind of was also announced, and that maybe they shouldn't have done this simultaneously, was their new Hallet.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
so they did announce a new Hallet, and it's the Hallet Mage, yeah, Mage 8K,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it's pre-order and whatnot, and so they say it prints faster.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Well,
I
the
don't know,
8K screen
maybe
adds resolution for one, so
for
that means
sure,
you get
and
better parts.
it's not it's still not the biggest one out there because it's like 10 point something
Mm-hmm.
inches or whatever. And so that the larger, if you have a large high res um uh resin printer, I'm
Yes.
sorry,
This is like, no
the
worries.
print speed
Yep.
doesn't really change. Like you print the same speed with a resin printer all the time basically,
Yep.
but because you have a larger volume, you can print more things,
Mm-hmm.
and like if you print one thing or 5 things on the print bed, they all finished at the same time
Yep.
because of the way the system works. So if they can speed that up, plus you have a larger print volume, I mean that
Mm-hmm.
definitely helps things. But it's just a different process, a different way of thinking, right? But I think their Hallet got lost in their K1 launch
I think it
because
did for
because
sure.
I didn't hear a ton of people talking about it. So I thought it was worth a mention that that was the other printer that they did announce.
Yeah, like it exists, and um, it's really funny because like so the resin motor speed, there's one motor and it goes up and down and up and down, and that's one of the big improvements they say they made. This motor can move at 100 millimeters per second.
Mhm.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I think they added 2 linear rails or
Mhm.
something to make it more stable, and or something like that. So
And there's
they
updated like mother main
right,
boards
and
and
I don't
yeah.
know, enough about it because you've got a resin printer, but
Mhm.
I don't have one, and I don't know that what software they're using and what firmware they're using if they're in-house custom now.
The Creality ones are all in-house custom right now.
Yeah. So because there
Yeah.
was a time there where people were using what is
G2.
it? Chitu, yeah, and then they ended up closing source their
Yeah.
firmware and
Well, in the
whatnot, and
last Creality
locking
one,
them to a slicer and stuff. So
yeah, and the one that I bought, the red, like the one with the red face cover on it, was the last Creality one that used Chitu.
okay,
But yeah, like there's a Hallett Mage and a Hallett Mage Pro, and like right now, resin printers are really good at printing like miniature figures and
anything
smaller
with you want
parts, right?
high detail
Yeah.
parts, right? Like
Um,
super high detail.
and
Like
the resin
that's
can,
what they strong at.
yeah, and like there's like high, there's high tension resin, high precision resin, and I think the resin you choose can actually make more of a difference than the screen, for certain parts. So anyway, it's out, it's here. It's exciting. Are you excited? I'm excited.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
me
don't
too.
know if resin doesn't get me excited.
It used to, and then you experienced for
Well,
half a day,
the
and
smell kills me. So
yeah, like it's
I just can't do it. I would need a full old school science lab
like a
range
fume
hood
hood.
with the
Yeah,
glass
yeah,
in the front to so that it didn't stink everything up. So
yeah. But
anyway, I just thought we'd mention that, and
yep,
then we can kind of move on with our lives
the
away
other,
from resin.
yeah, move along with our lives away from resin. That's a statement everybody should use. But yeah, so we have some advances right now. Um, just circle back to the first day really quick would be I personally I don't buy into this speedy buzzword stuff in 3D printing because like it's been there in the forum for a long time, and what you have is big companies just trying to jump on and capitalize on, something somebody did open source. Whoa. I hate the word open. Anyway, you know. Anyway, we're going to continue in our Marlin for I can't say the word again.
Foray,
No,
foray,
foray,
foray
whatever. You
down the
guys know the
Marlin
word.
rabbit hole.
Yeah, we're going down, and this week Greg's gonna take us down the rabbit hole. Um,
Yes, I will continue.
we we
We left off. I don't know if you have the
I
slide
do. Yeah,
of the checklist,
I
and
can show
then
it.
that way I don't have to change my sharing.
Yep. Nope. There it is. Yep. So
So
we did these ones.
yeah, so we did baud rate, serial communication, cosmetic stuff like name of the author and printer and stuff, and then so we're just going to go through this list because this is a really good checklist when you're going through and going to tweak your firmware. I mean, you got to know certain things. So right now we're on build volume. So there is a section in Marlin. Depending on what version you're doing, the line numbers might not match up. So just keep in mind it's about halfway through the Marlin code. In the version that we're looking at here, it's starting at line 1703 and down, which gives us a number of different things. So we got our bed size. So now there's some controversy on bed size a little bit. Like for example, like an Ender 3, the stated size is 220 by 220, right, for their bed size. Now, their bed is actually 235. Now, they guarantee 220 by 220 because of the motion system. They want to make sure that they can actually print within a certain volume. Now, does that mean you can't set it for bigger? No, you can, but you have to know the limits. Like, for example, we changed our print head on the Ender 3 to the new Sprite. Now that's a direct drive, and by changing it to the Sprite, we lost some build volume. So even though the bed size is 235 by 235, the nozzle itself won't reach everywhere on the build plate. So you have to be aware of the mechanical limits of whatever printer you're setting the bed size on. So, for example, your minus position here. So we've got the bed size 235, 235. X minus position is 0 in this example. Well, on my ender originally, it was actually negative 10. So my nozzle actually set 10 millimeters off the build plate. So if you want to accurately start and stop, you want to make sure you allow your printer to know the travel distance. So 0 is what is here in the default, but you have to check you literally put it all the way to the end stop, have a look, see where is the nozzle in relation to the edge of your bed, and that'll get you your X position. Also your Y position. If you slide your bed all the way back to your Y end stop, right, and you go to Y min and you check your nozzle and you're -3, well, then you may want to set this to -3, depending on how anal you want to be with where your actual print is going to sit on your build plate. So those are some things to be aware of. You can see here it says maximum position. So that's how far your for X, for example, how far your carriage moves. So right now it's only going to move 235. But if you have like a probe, for example, like a BL Touch or something that's positioned somewhere on either the front or the side of your print head, you may want to go and change this to because if you can still get further over to the right on your X once you hit 235, if you move it over, you can actually go, plus, 8, for example. Now you can go 8 millimeters further to the right. Now, once we get into our section on probes and whatnot, you'll see where you define your location in relation to the nozzle, and this comes more apparent on it. So the new printer that we just got in was the
Neo?
Ender 3 Neo.
Yeah.
And we actually had to tweak some of these because it was actually limiting the bed size quite a bit. So I had to come in here and tweak some of these to be able to rearrange it to be able to get the maximum bed size out of that printer. So bed size is important, but you also have to understand how the limits work. So this X max position, that again is how far to across the X to the max position you're allowing your print head to travel. Now with the Sprite, you had to limit it a certain bit because otherwise it would crash, and the screw and this is another thing we found on the Neo, would actually hit on the Z gantry wheel mounts. It would actually hit against the right hand side, so you have to limit it a certain width. The other thing on the Neo we found was when you went to the Y max position, we actually had to reduce this from 235. I had to go I think 233.
Yep.
So otherwise it would hit on the Y adjuster for tension, and it would clunk.
Which was similar to what we had with our sprites, right? Like when we put them on our Ender 3.
Well, the Sprite wasn't the Y position; it was more the X position. We had to change the screw size. But so they say it's a drop-in replacement, but you actually lose. And if you use their firmware, it works, but you lose build volume. They don't really disclose that.
They do advertise the Ender as a 220 by 220 printer, and everybody's just been like, "Oh, it's actually 235." But if you use these offsets in this firmware, it is 220 by 220. So it's not false advertising. It's just they're kind of reclaiming the space.
Except when you drop in the Sprite, you actually go to it's 210 by 220. Or actually, no, it's even less because the Y can't go for it. It's I think it's 200 by 200. You lose some more volume, which I mean, basically it skews skews where on the bed you're printing. Like
Mm-hmm.
you get more space on the right that you can't print in,
Yep.
and more space at the front of the bed
Mm-hmm.
that you can't print in.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like kind of an L shape that you can't print in. So
Yeah.
anyway, so this is just be aware. Know your bed sizes. Even on my CR10 over there, or my Chiron over there, I had to adjust this. Like my Chiron was like 335 by 315 or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
in order to have my probe land at the middle of the bed and have my prime line being right on the edge of the bed where I like it. I don't like it 10 centimeters in from the edge. I like it
Yep.
right on the edge, because I want to make sure that when I print, I can get the max out, just because I'm that anal about it, I guess. Type A.
I mean, yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Yeah.
It's one of those things with the probe, though. If you're a millimeter off, it's probably fine. So.
Yeah, and so the bed size and defining these areas and whatnot, and the minimum and max position. If you left it at 0, will it work? Yes, it will still work. But if you have a probe that's closer to the let's say the X min end stop, your probe in relation to the bed and whatnot is not going to probe the same way, unless you know exactly how to move it correctly. So that's why a negative position in relation to your nozzle is important for that kind of stuff. So it's something you learn over time and you tweak, but it's good to talk about here. I don't know if there's any other things you want to talk about bed size in this area.
I mean, let's face it.
Do we want to go
it's
over to the next one? All right.
There's not much to it other than that.
So that's your build. And then Matt, you're obviously, depending on what mod you put on, your maximum print height and whatnot is going to change if you have something that's stopping it from reaching its max height. So I would definitely home everything and then go up, move it manually up as high as you can. And then verify that you're not going to catch anything. Like the Sprite, for example, has a strain relief on it and a cable, and you don't really want to bend that down too much. So be aware that you could, if you modify your printer with a direct drive or something else, you may not want the printer wires going out the back. Maybe you want that out the side so that they can pass by the top of the gantry. So things to keep in mind. Again, know your printer, know your sizes, so that you can get these values in there correctly so that you can move on. So next, after build volume, we have acceleration. I think that's up this way, or is it the other way?
Just use the search thing.
I could.
Line 1189.
See, I was getting close.
Line 1189. Bingo. Oh, wrong game.
All right. So these, I believe this is a Ender example.
This is
right?
This is Ender 3. Yeah.
So these limitations are the hardware limitations. So when this stuff is important to understand, because if these are set too low, you can say that I'm printing at this speed, but your hardware limited to what your firmware is set to. So now there are settings inside of your slicer and whatnot where you can, depending on the slicer, you can define some of these in your advanced settings. But if your firmware is limited to, let's say, 100, right? And you have your slicer software set to 500, what do you think will happen, David, if you tried to move your X at 500?
It depends on the slicer, because some
Right.
slicers EEPROM write your settings before the print and then reset them after the print.
Right. But if your firmware doesn't support the M201, for example,
Then
as
you're
a
stuck at the
command,
lower speed.
right? Your acceleration is stuck at whatever it
Yeah.
says here. Now, can you use it? Can you override it with the M201 command? If that's enabled in your firmware, yes, you can. So then you could then define in your slicer your accelerations and maximum accelerations and whatnot.
Yeah.
Now they're pretty conservative in the example they give of 500, 500, 100, and 1000.
Yeah.
If you go to the Marlin one and you left it at their defaults, they're very generous on their acceleration.
Acceleration for all.
Yeah, if your acceleration is too fast, what happens, David, to your layers?
Well, I learned this in Marlin 2.6 with my Core XY. Everything just shifts all over the place.
Right. So that's
great.
something to be considered. So if this someone took the time and tuned this to more of what the default Corelli settings were, right? 500. Now, can I make this 3000? Oh yeah. Now, will I have good luck printing at 3000? Well, it depends. If your software is limiting it to 500, then yes, you'll probably have good luck.
Yeah,
But if your software is just letting it go at whatever the acceleration is of your printer, you could have a bad shift day with
you could. And interestingly enough, Core XYs thrive on acceleration.
Oh, absolutely.
So they like that higher number, whereas bed slingers, you can get away. So like, you can see on Greg's line that he's on there, right above it on the comment, it says XYZ and then E.
Yes.
So those are those. So like you could get away with, say, accelerating your X-axis faster than that. Easily.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? The only one
So
that you're limited
you can
is
set
the
them
Y.
like, you can set them all. Whoops.
8500.
Wow.
Yeah.
Set them all higher. But you want to tweak this carefully because you could hit issues with, because for a bed slinger, you're moving the mass of the bed, right? With a Core XY, your bed's just moving down. Right. So and the weight you're moving around with the Core XY is the gantry in the head. Now, obviously, the gantry moving forward and back, that has the mass of not only the head but also your whatever you're using as your gantry there, whether it's a linear rod or carbon fiber or whatever. There's a certain mass there. So your forward and back, let's say your Y movement, has a different mass than your X movement, even similar to your printer, because your Y movement on your bed has a different mass than the X movement of your gantry, right? So those numbers aren't necessarily going to be the same number for the acceleration, the maximum acceleration you can do. So you have to be aware that, yes, they put 500, but could you go 700 and 500 and it print well? Yeah, you could. So it's just something to be aware of. The defaults, are 500. Can you set this higher and then go and make a profile in Kira or in Prusa and specifically limit them via depending on what material you're printing with, right? Yes. And that is a good strategy if you're a little more advanced in 3D printing. If you're a beginner in 3D printing, you may not want to go that route, but it's personal preference, right?
And keeping the closer to defaults for beginners is always the correct choice because you get more success. And that's an important part when you start any hobby is the success.
And people might be asking, well, how do you know what your defaults are? That's a great question. That's when you would open your console tool, connect to your printer, and you can actually um, pull up your settings
Hmm.
and have a look and see what the current defaults are on yours. You may be surprised that they're lower than you expected or they're higher than you expected, but it's a good idea before you start. Let's say you have some odd printer that doesn't have a great support, right? Like you don't have that, you cannot find the factory firmware out there that to reflash it or the source for it. You'll want to run an M502
Three.
what 3 M503 to bring up in the console all of your settings, and you can go through them, and you'll see things like M201, 500, 500, 300, and 2000, right? And then oh well, mine was set this way.
Hmm.
So then you can take those settings and drop them in here. So at least you can then take all those settings and get a baseline that's similar to what your performance was and before you flashed your firmware,
I
and then
think
you can start tweaking from there.
we talked about this too before stream, and that's the fact that if you are positive that your printer that you're using is using Marlin firmware, manufacturers have to give you their config files. So, and I
Yeah.
used the example with mine before, right? Like I didn't know what it was, but I reached out to them, said, "Hey, can you send me this?" And they're
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, here you go," right? And so and then I got the config files from them. But and as it turns out, it was just the basic Marlin config.
But yeah,
But they still gave me something, right? So
right.
so you do have that recourse too if you know that you're using Marlin and your printer's still relatively, in production run. You can email the company or reach out and ask them for it.
Right. Absolutely. So,
Ooh, just one more
there,
thing with acceleration.
yes.
It would be they call this the default acceleration and the maximum accelerations, but this is a linear acceleration. So
Right.
this is on and then off. So
Yeah. So it's ramping up. It may not actually get to the full speed,
yeah.
right? Depending on how far it has to travel, right?
Yep. So
So
just think of this as linear because there's another section.
there is.
It's on
So
line 1257 if you're looking for it.
yeah. Well, there's also a few other things. So, for example, like right here, we're not changing this in the default here, but you can define and limit your maximum
Mm-hmm.
acceleration too.
Yeah.
You can see here it's commented out, but you can then define what is the maximum, so you can't exceed a certain level, right? So like if you know that it's your when you hit like 1500, that's anything faster than that, you get a layer shift. You can then define this and put those maximum limits to help kind of reduce that kind of thing. Um, but we're gonna just leave that for now.
Dominic had a comment that just says these settings might be really important with big really if you manage a makerspace, and you're not wrong because this again
Mhm.
leads to those successes in a makerspace, and then you don't
Yeah,
have to worry about more failures. So it's less time
absolutely.
on you and more time for the people being happy in your makerspace.
Yeah. So, and then we got, and there's really good notes here. Like, here's your different acceleration, retraction, acceleration, travel. So here's some more of the basic accelerations. Again, we'll leave these as defaults. And then we got our jerk settings. Here's classic jerk. And this here, I don't know if you want to talk about jerk at all, David, or not, but I mean the classic jerk, that was been around forever, and
But
then we've
yeah,
got the new e jerk here defined too.
we do.
So,
And so before you look at jerk, there's a setting for acceleration that you can turn on and off as well, and that's the S curve. acceleration.
Right.
So S
And
curve.
that's in
It's
configuration advanced, is it not?
nope. It's just underneath this 1257, I do believe.
Oh yeah, here it is.
And this goes, so it's along the same line. It changes. You can read what it does. There's lots of nerdy math involved, and you can click kind of like the jerk controlled stuff. But basically what it does is it accelerates on a curve instead of a straight line, and it actually gives you like tapering of the actual acceleration. So then it
Right.
can actually reduce ringing and that kind of artifacting. There's not much to say about jerk. Jerk is that hard stop that your printer goes, and when it shifts. And the classic way to deal with it is define these, these numbers and say, hey, this is how hard you're going to do it, and bang, and it does it. But there is another way that's better, or newer, and it was newer, and that would be junction deviation.
Right.
So the classic jerk settings that Greg has, I think they're just above there, but I think you could take all the things that he said about the acceleration and almost apply them to jerk, because jerk is how it changes the acceleration, and acceleration is acceleration. So they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, and some of the new algorithms for the new features and stuff that are coming out, they kind of override some of these, so you won't actually utilize them the same way, because they kind of are doing a more modern version of this. But we're not getting into that here. So
Nope.
So we got S curve acceleration. So I just commented that. So
Undefined.
And so that turns it on. And then linear advanced. So that is, I don't think that's in here anymore. It's in advanced, is it not?
Which one? Sorry.
Linear advanced.
I think it's still in there, but while we're looking for linear advance, there's a setting, and I forget its name again. There's a setting that why can't I ever remember it, that came out that actually kind of supersedes some of this stuff. Hold on, I'll go find it. Input shaping. I did it.
Yeah, it overrides some of the stuff, and some of the features. You mean, like, ideally, it should, if you have those features on and turn this other one on, it should tell you that you should turn that other one off, for example, and whatnot. So,
now there's a few comments in the comments section of the chat. I'll just read them. Stig, I'll summarize them. I won't read them all, but Stig says that, basically he wants to do a makerspace. He's setting one up to teach kids, and it requires tuning for higher speeds and such. And when we set our printers out in our school division, we always keep the settings underneath the highest end of the tolerance, so that way, like, when they take their firmware, they're using closer to what Greg showed in like those default settings, because we don't, it's not that they can't handle the speed, the printer wise, but like when you're let's call it pro user of a 3D printer, you understand when those failures are happening. Whereas when you're like, lots of our users are teachers and stuff, and they want to use it, which is great, but they want to use it just as a tool. Like, they're not there to learn it, learn the 3D printer inside and out and all the workings, right? This is a tool.
They want the name tags for the kids,
and they want to just
the project stuff.
So they want it to work, and I think that follows along the lines, with that settings. Like, we have, I think we have about, after this workshop, we'll have 200 and I think 30 3D printers that we've deployed and workshop through in the school district, and that's kind of what we do. But yes, so Greg has found
it's in configuration.advanced.
Mm-hmm.
And so now when you enable linear advance, there is some calibration that's required. So you will have to figure out what the K value is for your printer. You will need to do a calibration, and there's some really good videos. Teaching Tech has some, and there's some good models and whatnot that you can define your linear advance, your bed size, and your acceleration, and it will print the model, and it basically it does it has the K value of whatever. So this one's defaulted 0.22, for example. So you could go 0.0 all the way up to 0.22, and it will draw a line. Basically, what happens is your print head accelerates and decelerates, and as it's accelerating and decelerating, it's allowing less. It starts with less material, more material, and less material. So your your line is not fully flat. It's either too skinny in the middle or too skinny on the sides.
Mm-hmm.
What you want is you want a line that's consistent all the way across, with your speed. So this adjusts for your acceleration and deceleration and movement all at once. So it's taking into effect that all of the movements of the mass of your print head and everything. So it's just that movement you have to get calibrated correctly. So then that gives you your K value that you're going to get when you go down the list.
I want to say this setting's like what, 3 years?
Yeah, it's been around for 3 years now. Now this does get replaced. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't want linear advance on if you have the new feature on, right?
It works great until the top layer.
Yeah. But so this value, this algorithm, it kind of would fight. What is it called?
Thing we just talked about that we never remember, input shaping.
So this is like the predecessor to input shaper. It doesn't do the exact same thing, because input shaper looks at resonance of all the movements in X and Y of your printer.
Yep.
Whereas this just takes into account to try to even out the extrusion speed along with the move in relation to the movement of the head.
Yep.
Just in a linear fashion. That's why it's a linear advance, right? It's going in a straight line. Whereas the new algorithms and whatnot are looking at that, but they're also looking at full motion of your X and Y and additional frequencies that are brought into it, so that if you do increase your speed to 150 millimeters a second, what's going to happen is, are you going to get tons of ringing? Are you going to get tons of artifacts in your print walls? Are you going to get other things? It helps eliminate that sort of thing when you go to extreme speed. Now, do you need to do anything more than a linear advance?
So we had that conversation before this too, right? Like, what we want to give you right now is just your printer needs to work.
Yeah.
Right.
So you don't even need to start with this. That's an advanced thing you can turn on later. Do you need it to get a good print? No. Could you turn it on and get a slightly better print? Yes. But for every situation, no.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, and we did talk about, because Greg and I both ran into this problem where when we put our new sprite on, we did new firmware and we turned input shaping on and then it was like, what's going on, right? If you were to turn that on, both of them, it'll give you a sanity check for one. So like on compile.
Well, not originally. Originally, it did not give you that, and then they fought.
Well, it does, but it still lets you compile, and then now I think it was there before too, but there's a beta setting you have to turn on, and it's a variable, and then that flag actually lets them kind of work
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's, and I think as we move ahead, and as like, I don't think we're even on the second generation of input shaper yet.
no.
Um, because there is some newer algorithms and that they're working with, right? So as they move ahead with that,
Yep.
um, the sanity checks, like you said,
Mm.
the warnings. Oh, you have this feature on. Well, this feature and this feature are known to cause problems together, so you should disable this feature. Those kind of feedback will be coming as we move ahead, but these are so new that some of that stuff is unknown, right? So that, and that's, we had that same thing, like when I think we had a feature when you had certain steppers, right? If you had a 2208 or
Mm-hmm.
2130, I can't remember, it was way back in the day, and you had a certain feature turned on,
It was
they
linear
did not
advance.
play. They linear advance with, I think, 2130s or something.
Yep.
One of the TMC,
Yep.
um, one of them didn't
Trinamic. Yeah.
play nice together, and it took them a while to figure out how to make it play nice. And that's one thing. Like, if you have a stable version of your Marlin, um, then you're probably going to have a mature set of features that are fairly tweaked. But if
Mm-hmm.
you pull up a nightly build and you get the .x build, um, you are opening yourself up to new things that they're just figuring out. So be aware that if you want the tried and true known issue version, the stable version, don't get the .x. Get the which is the nightly, right?
I mean,
If there's something new you want to try, or a new feature, or
mm-hmm.
let's say, for example, there's a board that is only in the .x, that your board is not in the other one, well, then you've got to go do it. But just be aware.
Yeah. I mean, don't be scared of the .x. And
No,
like, if you're
you can
not
always go
using new
back.
features, it's not like it's gonna. Usually, the new features are always toggleable by
Yes,
commenting, and so it's like you don't
yes,
have to be scared of them because they won't be on anyway. And like in Stig's case, for example, he was like the Neo wasn't listed in the regular build; it's only in the nightly right now. And that's you go there to grab it and compile. We compiled it last week.
yep,
After the stream, he sent. We chatted in Discord quick about it, and then I guess it was 2 weeks ago, but he sent it over. We compiled it. It was great. Um,
yeah.
sorry, Greg.
No,
Sorry.
it's all good.
You continue.
It's all good. So that kind of takes us to the end of the linear advance section,
Mm-hmm.
and then we're going to get into some motion and steppers. So that is way back here, I do believe. Boop,
I
boop,
don't remember.
boop.
I always just search
Yeah,
2208,
no,
honestly.
it well, but this has 4988s in it, for
That's
example.
true. It's on 156.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
I'm just helping. Okay. I'm like the searcher. I tried the .x for the Neo, but it didn't compile, most likely due to the typo. Yeah, yeah, and I think, yeah, the um, I've had nightlies not build before too,
Yeah,
because they miss like a library file or something.
yeah.
So,
So so knowing your board type is important, because you got to define your board type, um, and then knowing what stepper drivers are on your board. So, for example, for the longest time, the 4988 was the de
mm-hmm,
facto stepper. And so, if you have an older Ender 3, or
mm-hmm,
even an Ender 3 Pro, one of the first ones, you're going to have most likely a 4988. Even if you have a CR10, right? You're going to have a
mm-hmm.
4988.
Yeah.
Unless you've
Well,
done some upgrading. Some of the newer boards have gone to, and you can see a list of all the drivers here. The current drivers, there'll be more, and some of them aren't listed here, but they're compatible. So, for example, the 2208s here come in. You can set them in the regular mode or standalone mode. Now the difference is UART, and in TMC 130 Kate's was SPI back in the day.
Yeah.
And so those modes differ slightly. For example, with the TMC steppers, if you are in TMC 2208 or 2209 mode or 26X or whatever, a 2225 is the same as a 2208, and a 2226 is a 2209. Now, those two drivers, they've changed the packaging. That's why the numbers changed. It was actually to do with the packaging more than anything else. They're chipset, feature set, very similar. But if you go standalone, you have to adjust your voltage with the potentiometer on the board. Whereas if you have a UART enabled board, you can actually define the voltage in your firmware, and you can even expose that so you can tweak it. There's a setting where you can expose it, and you can actually adjust it with the knob on your printer and adjust it. So if your drivers are overheating and it was set to like 1.22 and it really should be 850, you can crank her down and save it, and then away you go. Whereas if you're on a Creality 4.2 board or a 4 series board, you're most likely either you're running a 2208 and standalone.
They're so 2209s.
Are they? Well, okay, the original ones are 2208s, but either way, 2208, 2209, they were in standalone mode. So you have to go in, flip your printer over, take your meter, check, put it on ground, put it on the potentiometer, and check your voltage. Okay, if it's 1.4, you give it a tweak, check it again. Now you'll have to do this a number of times because you'll want to get your voltage into the right range. If you have a Ender 3 Pro or any of them, they tend to overdrive their stepper drivers. We've noticed this. The stepper motors get super hot, and the stepper drivers get super hot. And eventually, I've had a number of boards fail that are stock boards because they don't like. They could eliminate this issue if they went to UART and actually set the voltages via software, in my opinion. But
I agree.
So it's something to be aware of, and you can see there's a ton of different drivers. There's Toshiba drivers. There's a number of different drivers from different brands. And to change whichever one, for example, I can just highlight this, right? And I can copy it, and I can paste it down here. Yep. Boom. Now I'm in standalone mode. Now, if I have like a Big Tree Tech board with UART, I won't necessarily. I probably want, not in standalone mode here. Now, if I'm not going to use standalone mode here, right, then I'm probably going to go into my configuration advanced, and near the bottom over here, if we have UART, somewhere near the bottom, let's go TMC. There we go. You can, where are we here? Come on.
And then just look, yeah.
Oh, here
you go.
Here we are. I had to get a little further down. So if you have the driver set, this is just an example. So X current is set to 800 here. So if I wanted to, I could say, no, X should only be 750. Right. So then you can change your current here, and that's much simpler than having the 1200 that that Creality sets and melts your stepper. It's much nicer to be able to just go in and define a number. And again, you can only do this with stepper drivers that have UART enabled. TMC is the most popular that has that, and you have to have a board that is capable. And the current Creality boards, the 422s, the 42 whatevers, they don't allow this. Which it's not that the stepper driver isn't capable of it; they haven't engineered the board to work with this.
Yeah.
So that's something to be aware of. But I think that's kind of where we're gonna end the going over of the stepper driver.
Yeah, for this week. I will mention Greg and I also discovered on the newer Creality boards that the firmware flashing seems to be different. The bootloader has seemed to have changed on the Neos from the old ones. So if you had a 4.22 or a 7 from the older times, you had to rename the firmware every time you flashed it. On the new ones, it's much like the Big Tree Tech and the other boards with the other bootloader where you just call it firmware.bin now. Again,
I was just so frustrated the other day because I flashed it like 4 times and it's not flashing. I'm like, what the heck? So I finally started setting them all to firmware.bin, and then boom, it flashed no problem. And I was like, the other thing to note is they are using a different chipset on the screens, even though the screens are fully compatible with the Ender 3 Pro and whatnot. The screens are not using the DWin firmware. So there's currently no way to take the Neo screen and make it pretty when you go to Marlin mode. So what I mean, make it pretty is you can actually have the word Marlin at the top and have an like animation for the fan and make it, and you can even have a custom boot screen. You can't do that yet. Now I say yet because I'm sure someone will figure it out. There are tools out there that will allow you to do it. But no one has. The Neo is so new that not enough people have kind of worked on that yet. So but if you have the older one, you can customize it still.
It's true. If you're here and you're new, like, share, subscribe. If you're not new, do the share one. But if you're new, like and subscribe. That'd be great. Also, we'd like to say thanks to our Patreon team. Held at the top. Thank you so much. Everybody on this list is very important to making all our projects happen, including the websites and other things that kind of happen behind the scene. So you can follow us and join us at patreon.com/3dmakeit. We have a very active Discord where we share lots of fun things and feeds and what's going on.
Like today, Stig just shared a printer on there that's I got to read about it. $350 to build. It's kind of interesting. So
it looks very interesting.
So definitely gonna read that, and if you're curious, join us.
All of our other stuff can be found at www.3dmakeit.ca, and you can join the family at many different places, and we'll be back next week with more Marlin. One more make of Marlin, I think.
We've got, there's definitely lots of stuff, and there's probably even some more advanced stuff that we can go through. But these are the features that will get you great success to get started, right? Like, we want you guys to have success in printing. And so these are kind of the checklist. If you are doing your first firmware, we want you guys to have success. So this is the best kind of basic list to kind of get you started. Obviously, there's thousands of settings in there that you can go more advanced, but this will definitely get you started. So
definitely. Anyway, until next time, until we meet again, thanks for coming, and we'll see you guys